Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're glad to have you on board for another installment of the No Trade Clause podcast. This is our 122nd installment. And this evening, we're going to be going through a few players that we all think will be top breakout candidates for the upcoming season, 24-25. And believe it or not, we're just maybe a week or two away from training camp, about a month away from the tip off of the regular season. So as we close into the official start of action for the NBA, we are taking some time on the podcast to do a little bit of a ramp up and kind of go through some players and teams that we're excited to watch and maybe throw out some predictions on what's going to happen next season. So we're really excited about that. What we're also excited about is the opportunity to speak with James Herbert from CBS Sports. He is an NBA writer for the outlet. He does some great work over there. And this is his second time over on the pod. So I'm really excited to have James back on board. Avi is in the building, and you have him on board as well. So we're both really excited about the opportunity to speak with James about a few players that we think will be incredibly fun to watch for various reasons next season. So James, want to thank you again for taking time out of your day to join us. We're really looking forward to it. And I hope the off season has been treating you well, even though the Olympics kind of made it feel like it's a little bit shorter than usual.
Yeah, no, I'm psyched for this season to start up again. I'm psyched to be here with you guys now. Thanks for having me.
So, guys, we're going to get started with a little bit of an icebreaker to get the ball rolling on this podcast. Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm sure you're aware that Joel Embiid, previous NBA MVP, has signed a 3-year extension with the Philadelphia 76ers. So this deal is worth $192 million over 3 years. And combined with the 2 years remaining on his current deal, that puts him about number 3 overall in the NBA in terms of total salary. So he's at $515 million over the next 5 years. Embiid will be a Sixer until 28 or 29. It depends on whether or not he picks up that player option in the last year of his deal. But basically, they took that year that was a player option in 26, 27. It was declined by default, and then that will serve as the first year of the extension about 2 years from now for Embiid. So this is an interesting deal because obviously Embiid is one of the top 3 or 4 players in the NBA. When he's healthy, he's dominant, but he has had issues in the past staying healthy, especially in the playoffs, whether it's the foot, the knee, whatever the case is. He has a little bit of an ailment, and that has hurt the Sixers in the past, just being as competitive as possible. So it does kind of bring into question of the overall health of Embiid as he gets into his 30s. He will be entering kind of like the mid-30s of his career by the time this deal is over. So it's a little bit risky, I think, at first glance. But with a guy as good as Embiid, you kind of just take a swing there. He's definitely one of the best players in the NBA, probably one of the best players in Sixers history, and just one of the greats in the game. So to hand off to you, James, what were your first overall impressions of this deal? And how do you kind of think this is going to play out for the Sixers over the next 4 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my impressions were altogether different than yours. I think you're right in that, like, in a literal sense, yeah, there's some risk here for the Sixers. You're signing up to pay a guy into his mid-30s who has been injured virtually every year in the playoffs. This is inherently like taking on some degree of risk that he will still be able to play at an MVP level, or at least something approximating that a few years from now. At the same time, when I saw the news, it just kind of felt like, all right, well, this is a formality. I mean, this is Joel Embiid. Of course, they are going to offer him the most that they can offer him, and I think it was just a matter of whether or not he wanted to like go and make that commitment at this point. Like these are the contracts that players of his caliber get. It felt to me like this was kind of a capstone on the Sixers offseason. Like they went into the offseason, there's a whole bunch of uncertainty. They basically had nobody on the roster. They even had to go and re-sign Tyrese Maxey, who they had asked to wait a year until they can give him his max that he'd obviously earned. And they end it with a like fairly deep team with a big 3, and then a bunch of guys who I think slot in quite well around them. Like I thought they might lose Kelly Oubre in the summer just because he'd come on a minimum last year. They are limited in terms of how much they were able to pay him. They didn't just like not lose him. They kept him on a team friendly deal. And then they also went and stole Caleb Martin from the Heat, which was just like a crazy sort of turn of events in that he was actually offered more from the Heat, turned it down, tried his luck in what turned out to be a terrible market for free agents, and the Sixers end up being the beneficiaries of that. I like some of their other moves too. Like I liked taking a flyer on Gershon Yabusele after seeing what he did in the Olympics and just the numbers he's been putting up overseas since he left the Celtics. I liked bringing back Kyle Lowry, thought he was great in the role that he played for them last year. Would have liked to see them, retain Nick Batum. I think that was close. They couldn't do it, but I think this is a statement from Embiid, really, that he's comfortable there, that he wants to finish his career there. He did literally put that on Instagram. Not something he hasn't said before, but I mean, this is kind of making that commitment formally. Like, I don't want to go anywhere else. I don't need to hold your feet to the fire or keep my options open or any of that. I'm comfortable with the coach. I'm comfortable with my now 2 co-stars, and I'm comfortable with the mostly veteran group that is sort of surrounding that big three. So that's kind of how I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same. To me, it was just business as usual. I mean, as soon as it was announced, I wasn't really shocked in any way. I know it ties them up with him until at least his age 34 season. And with that player option, I'm guessing by the time that comes around, they'll be renegotiating. But then when you kind of stop and think about where the market is at right now, and you look at some of these rookie extensions, I know it's a different tier of spending, but when I just look at some of the extensions, Mobley or Cade Cunningham have gone simply off the basis of promise. Meanwhile, we have here like a one-time MVP winner who easily could have won 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 if Jokic didn't exist, right? I mean, this is the sort of premium player you can't get anywhere else. So from both sides, I could kind of see why they wanted to lock it up. From Embiid's perspective, you just kind of want to get the money in now, so you're not dealing with that lingering over your head, especially when you've had health concerns or injuries in your past. So it just seemed like a deal that made sense. And then when you start looking at the roster they've assembled, I can see from his perspective being pretty happy with that as well. Maxey will also be tied to him now for the next 5 seasons. Paul George will be there for at least 3 to 4 years in all likelihood. And considering the seasons those two just came off of, you feel pretty happy that you have 2 co-stars who supplement you well and also complement each other very well. And then with the supporting cast, as you went over, I thought Oubre was nice. I like Jared McCain in the draft. He might not be ready for this year, but you're locked up now for 5 years. By year 2 or 3, I think he could be a really important piece. Caleb Martin in the regular season, I sometimes have qualms with him, but then every time he comes on the postseason and just makes everything, it just completely catches on fire. So just for that value, I like having him there as well. Yabusele I thought was really great in the Olympics, and that poster dunk on LeBron was chef's kiss, beautiful. I like the Andre Drummond edition as well.
Yeah,
I like the
try to
Drummond
just
edition as well.
pretend that the dunk never happened, but we know what happened. We know what went down. So we'll put it out there and keep it alive.
But I like the addition of Drummond as well. If you're going to lose Paul Reed, I think Drummond as a backup center who is not quite as foul prone as Paul Reed makes him a little bit more dependable when Embiid does get hurt. So I like that addition for kind of stabilizing you in the regular season. I just think Philly has a good team, and if you're someone like an Embiid and you see, okay, I'm trust the process. I'm kind of associated with this franchise now to carry them to a promised land. No one has been able to take us to since, I don't know, Moses Malone, Iverson, maybe, I guess, since he took him to the finals. Like, I think he almost in a way would probably feel like he owes something to the city that's believed in him so much. So I think now's the time to make it happen. And this is kind of your signaling your commitment that, hey, I'm putting my roots down here and let's go. We have a 4 or 5 year window here. Let's cook.
I'm with you guys. Those are really great thoughts. I don't really have too much else to add to that. It's just kind of like a little cherry on top of this free agency, or rather just this summer of extensions, veteran extensions. And Bobby Marks posted on Twitter the amount of money that's gone out this summer alone, 15 players since July 1st, 1.9 billion with a B dollars in extensions. Brunson, Curry, Tatum, Embiid, tons of guys marking in. So just crazy money going along right now. But I mean, if you're that tier of player, it's a no-brainer. And Embiid definitely is that guy. He's going to carry the Sixers for years to come. So that's pretty exciting. So to get into the meat and potatoes here, guys, of this podcast, we're going to get into a few players that we each think are going to be prime candidates to take that leap next season. We have different criteria here. We're going to have some second-year players, third, fourth. Some guys are more established, some are unknown, relatively speaking. So I think we're going to have a good variety of different players here. But how this is going to work, everybody that's watching us, we're going to go through 3 rounds. And one of us is going to start, and then we're going to just hand it to the other 2 guys for each to give a name. And then we're going to progress to the next round. And we're going to do that 3 times. And then at the end, we're going to have a little bit of an honorable mention section for some guys that may not be in the top tier of that, but nonetheless will be good guys to look out for to make some kind of leap next season to improve their games. So let's go into round one here. James, you are our special guest, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say here. So, James, start us off. Avi, you can take the torch after that, and then we'll see what I have cooking after you guys go. So, what you got for us, James?
Sure. I got some obscure names on this list, but I feel like I should start with somebody a little more mainstream. I'll take Shaedon Sharpe as somebody who I think could break out this year. And he's still just 21, which is crazy. He played 32 games last year for Portland. He had this core muscle injury that he had to get surgery for. So basically like mid-January onward, like that, he was done. He did, though, kind of start to break out before that in terms of at least offensive output. It wasn't the most efficient, but he had some pretty big games. And if you looked at just sort of how he operated as a playmaker, mostly for himself, but also, he can make some nice passes, even if he's not a pass first player. I think there was some growth there. I think this is kind of the year where you're hoping that you see it all come together, right? Like the talent has been quite obvious since before he was in the NBA. His athleticism is absolutely insane. He's a really smooth player. The shot looks pure, and like the spot up shooting numbers last year were really good. It's just sort of a matter of the efficiency coming together. So you can see him get those 25 to 30 point games, but he's not taking 25 to 30 shots to get there. That's sort of what we want to see. Obviously, you'd also want to see some growth on defense. He's been a pretty terrible defender throughout his NBA career so far. But he has all the tools, right? Like he's like one of the most athletic people in the NBA. So I think in theory he could be a fine defender. We just kind of have to see. And I want to see what happens with Portland's roster. Like in picking him here, there is sort of a tacit assumption that there will be space created for him at some point. I'm not sure Anthony Simons is necessarily going to finish the season in Portland. Like we'll just kind of have to see how things shake out there. But I do think like long term, they want Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe to be their backcourt.
Yeah, that name kind of threw me for a loop there. I didn't actually think about Shaedon Sharpe in this, but as you explain it, I can see why actually, because Shaedon Sharpe has been a mystery box, it's fair to say, for the most part throughout his NBA career. Actually, even before that, I mean, even in college, when I was trying to scout him and evaluate him for the draft, I was having to go back through like high school film and some of his AAU games and stuff because there's just nothing from college because he didn't really play. And then even within the NBA, his rookie year was. You had those memorable dunks and you had a couple moments, flashes here and there. Like you could tell he's a scorer and you could tell he's an NBA caliber athlete, but you weren't quite sure what the package was. Last year, up until December, I was still a little worried. Hey, maybe this just isn't going to work. Maybe it was all just high school highlights the way there was for like James Wiseman back in the day. Like maybe there's nothing here. But then I thought he had a really nice December. And as you're saying, some of those flashes of, hey, maybe there is some secondary playmaking here. Maybe he actually can be your second or third scorer on a pretty good team. There might be an element of that present in this player. So I think this year I could see him as a breakout, if only because I myself don't feel like I have a clear vision of what he's going to be on a consistent basis. And this is the first time he's really going to get to play 82 games as a developed NBA player who kind of knows what he's going through.
So, Avi, for your, what do you have is for us is like your first player that you personally think is going to kind of take that lead?
This is going to be off the beaten path. Isaiah Hartenstein. Does that count?
Interesting.
Does it count?
So,
I
me on it.
That first.
I'm not going to say it doesn't count, but you have to like, what is going to be so much better? Because he was really good last year, right? So
yeah, he was.
Make the case.
He has always been extremely efficient. You can go back to his Clippers season as well. That first year, he's had multiple years now where in a smaller role, I think he's done really good. But I think last year, at times, especially when Mitchell Robinson got hurt, and there were portions of the season where they were just working with like this just broken down roster. That's how Deuce McBride got in the lineup as well, just because they were down to almost nobody. Precious Achiuwa was having to play heavy minutes. I thought I saw some flashes of Hartenstein as a passer that makes me really excited of what he can do if he's getting like a starter's loads worth of minutes with OKC in particular, because they have such a run and cut sort of offense. They have all that guard to guard screening. I could see Mark Daigneault start to use Isaiah Hartenstein the way the Nuggets have used Jokic and the way the Kings have used Sabonis. And with those shooters now flanking him, everyone around him now is a plus shooter. Even someone like Cason Wallace, who isn't much of an offensive player yet, is still an extremely efficient, like 40% level shooter. I think that entire roster complements him so well. I think from a production output, we could see him have career highs in basically everything but rebounds. I think he could average like 3.5 to 4 assists per game. I think his scoring could be up to 11 or 12 if he gets, if he gets a 30-minute workload on this sort of team with all that open space to work through. And then I think there's just a big difference between playing with Tibbs, where Tibbs is just trying to, I guess, have Hartenstein there to provide a solidified defensive front court. Whereas with the Thunder, I feel like they're much more, I don't want to say just focused on development, but they are a little bit more developmentally focused, where they do feel like, hey, in the long-term interest of this team, we have signed Hartenstein here for a lot of money. We want him to develop as a passer because we think we could potentially develop this into like almost a Sengun, like a sub all-star level player. And I think this year might be his first real step where he starts showing people, hey, there's more to me than you think.
Yeah, this dude, I mean, he's an awesome passer right now. Like, I think in the second half of last year, you saw it come out naturally. Like, I don't think it's something Tibbs exactly scripted, but it was like, all right, well, Randall's out. Also, every team is blitzing Jalen Brunson like crazy, so he's getting all these short roll opportunities, and you're just seeing him make the perfect read every single time. Like, he's awesome in that situation. They also just, when possessions broke down, they would play through him and use him as a hub, because like dating back to his Clippers days, like that's how he wants to play. Like that's that's his whole, like, you know, he didn't grow up playing like a big man. So that's what he wants to do. I think that's why the Thunder got him. Like, they want to diversify their offense. It was all drive and kick last year, and in the playoffs, I mean, you saw their offense in a couple of those games against Dallas. It just kind of died because they didn't, like, Dallas was just straight up disrespecting some of their shooters, or quote unquote shooters, and it didn't hit the same. And they want to be able to like hit you from other angles than they could last year. And Hartenstein's going to be an enormous part of that, I think. So yeah, I buy it.
We're covering all the different facets here when it comes to these type of players. So I do like that. I'm going to go with a name that's probably pretty common amongst player or fans looking forward to next season. I think that, I mean, you guys probably at least have them in your mind somewhere. But when you look at the Golden State Warriors and what Jonathan Kuminga has done so far in his career, you do see that progression every year. You look at the numbers, and he's getting more playing time. He's getting more minutes, playing more games. You know, he went from about 17 minutes a game his first season to about 26 last season. And the game started increases as well. I mean, he started over half the games for the Warriors last season, 46 games. So you can see how Kerr is starting to trust him more and more as the years go on. He starts to refine his game. He starts to get more comfortable utilizing his athleticism and just his overall size as 6'8", 6'9" forward that has crazy athleticism. I'm really encouraged by the free throw numbers. So like 2 years ago, you look at how much he was getting to the line, only about 2 times a game, which is just completely too low for a guy that has that kind of athletic prowess. Jumping up to 4 last season, so doubling those amount of free throw attempts, getting higher usage, about 23%, while reducing his turnover percentage. So it was only at about 11.6%, which is a good improvement over the seasons before. You can see how he's getting more comfortable with the ball in his hand. And no, he's not going to be a primary creator, most likely like a Curry type guy, where like you're going to go to him for buckets every single time down. But for somebody that can be used in a variety of different ways, he can be a cutter, he can be a screen and roller in certain situations. I think that his overall prowess on the basketball court is really just kind of steadily rising. And I think next season, now that I think Kerr fully trusts him, I imagine he's going to start the majority, if not all, the games for the Warriors. Their forward center rotation isn't exactly super deep. Yes, Wiggins is there. Yes, Looney is there. Draymond, obviously. But, I mean, if Draymond's playing backup center, if Wiggins likes to play the 3 and he's going to stick to that position, I think, Avi, you mentioned that while we were kind of talking about rotations for next season.
Yeah.
That, I mean, there's a perfect opportunity for Kuminga to get some good run and to continue to put the entire game together. Now, you look at his 3-point percentage and his attempts; those are still kind of where they were before. I haven't seen a massive leap from him in that department, but I mean, that's just icing on the cake. I think he's going to be a great player regardless if the three starts to hit or not. But if it does, it just makes him even more lethal as an offensive player, while also being a good player to be able to switch on multiple different players defensively. Just be a pest, just be that wing that Golden State can put on some of the best perimeter players in the other team, and at least get some decent results out of that. So I think for those reasons, Kuminga kind of stands out to me as a guy that, hey, he's going into year 4 here, and it took a while for him to kind of figure out how to really play the game the right way. But going back to last season, especially as you got later in the season, you saw some real serious flashes, kind of like if we're talking about those guys like previously that you guys brought up, Shaedon Sharpe is an example. You kind of see the little data points, but I think going forward to next season, he can start to put that all together to where it becomes more consistent. So I expect 30 plus minutes a game, starting the majority of games, and he's just going to be put in a position to have a great impact on the court. So that's my first player, and I'm really looking forward to see what he brings to the table. Now that it's more than just talent, it's actually manifesting in something more to like a really good overall basketball player.
Do you think, okay, did you read the interview he just did with Tim Kawakami? Because I think it is interesting. He is talking about how he's worked on his 3-point shot, and he thinks he's improved a lot as a shooter. He's talking about how he's been a small forward his whole life, emphasizing that, even though he's also saying, I can play any position. I don't really have one.
Yeah.
But I think he knows he kind of needs to be able to play the 3 if he really wants to get 30 plus minutes a night and be like the guy that he wants to be. And unless he's shooting threes, I don't know that he's going to get that many minutes at that spot. So
right. Yeah.
This is not, I'm not like pushing back because he got a ton better last year. Talent is obvious. Right. It's just the Warriors in a weird situation. Like they late last year, they really found something when honestly it was when Kuminga got hurt. They were playing Trayce Jackson-Davis and Draymond Green together. Trayce Jackson-Davis does not really want to shoot threes. That's not a thing. Draymond actually took a few more of them last year, but nobody guards him out there. And then when Kuminga came back, I mean, look at the playing game. He came off the bench, and he came off the bench because they didn't want to put him at the 3 next to 2 guys who have no gravity on the perimeter. And those guys are still there. They haven't like really changed that. They could just decide like, screw it, we're just going to start Draymond at the 5 and Kuminga at the 4. Like that could work. But if they're going to start Trayce Jackson-Davis, I don't think they're benching Draymond for Kuminga. So he kind of has to hit those shots. So I need to see that before, like I could see him doing what he did again, like from last year. But if it's going to be a leap, I kind of feel like he needs to make threes. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I feel the exact same way. That you said it. That's exactly what I was thinking the whole time. Because even when I was mapping out myself what I thought the rotations would be, I actually do have Kuminga right now coming off the bench and Trayce Jackson as the starter because of that stretch. Trayce Jackson-Davis and Draymond Green have they have multiple things, but they have one thing in particular that separates them right now from Kuminga, and that is naturally their feel for passing, and especially when you have shooters surrounding them, is so much better than Kuminga's is. He's improved a lot at that facet of the game from where he was his rookie year to now, but it's still not something that comes naturally to him. When he has the ball, the first thing he looks at is the defender. The next thing he looks at is the rim. His eyes don't always go to what the action setup is, like where things are supposed to go, who is coming free now off the screen. Like there are still moments where you see Kuminga having to wrestle with the fact that, hey, I'm trying to be the scoring guy versus, well, maybe that's not what we need from you, and maybe that doesn't optimize what you can potentially be. I think he also knows that he needs to be a small forward, as you said, and I think the team really needs him to be the small forward. I think long term, they're looking at Kuminga or Moody and saying, can one of you please take Wiggins' spot so we can either chop him around or just bench him or find something? Because last season, I thought defensively, his head just wasn't in it. I don't know if it was because of all the personal issues he's had or the injury he came off of last year. I don't want to speculate. For his sake and for his teammates, I hope that he starts feeling better soon and starts getting in that right space, because defensively, I just thought he was kind of flippant. He just wasn't there. Like, it's just not the same level of screen navigation. He's not really fighting on or off ball. It just felt like they need more from that small forward spot. And if he is to have a breakout, it's going to be, because the free throw shooting percentages that ticked up last year are an indicator of maybe his shot will get better. Maybe he can be a 35% shooter and maybe 36 or 37% on open volume, on open shots with a decent volume. Maybe he does become like a 77 or 78% free throw shooter, where now you have the indicators starting to match up with the 3-point percentage. Now you can stick him at small forward, and now the team as a whole has much more upside. But if the shot doesn't come around, I think there's enough questions with everything else that I still see him personally stuck on the bench with the Warriors left waiting and wondering when will one of these two please beat Wiggins for a starting job.
Those are valid concerns for sure. I guess it just comes down to like how that part of his game kind of irons out in year 4, just being a spacer. If that comes along, then it kind of gives the Warriors more opportunities, more options, and then he can definitely slot in more lineups and play more minutes for sure. So let's get started on round 2 here, guys, and see who else we have on our docket here. We'll go reverse this time. I'll start it off, and then I'll hand it to you, James, and then Avi can finish off here. So the second name on my list here that I'm really excited for him to be more involved, and I think for him it just comes down to health rather than just having a bigger role in the team. He's going to have a big role if he plays more. This is Mark Williams for the Charlotte Hornets. Center here that has, I think, immense potential here. He's only 22 years old, but the problem is he's only played 62 games in total in 2 seasons. And he only played 19 last season before a back injury flared up, knocked him out, and he basically didn't play again after, maybe a quarter of the way through the season. So if he can really get on the court and play at least the minutes he played last year, which, he was about 26 minutes a game, he might be a Robert Williams type of player to where he never plays super heavy minutes because of first the injury history and second just the overall conditioning. Maybe he doesn't ever play 35 plus, but even if he can get to upper 20s to 30, I think he can have a real serious impact for the Hornets. You look at their point guard play with LaMelo, that's already there. Brandon Miller as an emerging wing, you have him in the fold for a long time. And then Mark down low, just being insane on the boards. Like he was approaching 10 rebounds per game last season and under 30 minutes played. He is, without a doubt, probably one of the best young rebounders, along with Jalen Duren for Detroit. You look at what those guys could do on the boards to like just give second chances for their teams. It's really impressive. And then, of course, playing with a guy like LaMelo, it's just going to enable him just to be spoon-fed those opportunities. And then, of course, with Brandon Miller, and then, they made some moves, Seth Curry, to give themselves a little bit more spacing. I think can definitely make things easier on him, just being a perfect pick and roll partner with LaMelo. So, for next season, I really expect him. I hope that he can play more games. And then it's just kind of expanding on what's already been there in short spurts. But if he can really play 50 to 60 games, if not more, then I think it kind of like really solidifies himself as a core piece of the future of the Hornets. And then I kind of forgot about this until I looked at the total rotation on Basketball Reference, but they actually brought in Taj Gibson as like a veteran presence. And obviously he's not going to play hardly at all. I wouldn't expect that, but he's probably one of the best vets that you can find to just kind of be on the bench and say, like, this is how you're a pro. This is how it's done. This is how you stick around a long time. I've been in the league for 15, 16 years. So for Mark, having that guy in the fold, I think is going to help him immensely. And just kind of figuring out how to stay on the floor. If there's a guy next to you that's played for a long time, he knows how to get your body in the right place to where you can play for a long time. So I see Mark as a guy that has demonstrated that he can be a centerpiece center, but he just needs to be on the court more consistently, and then just kind of take more advantage of the fact that he's super efficient in the 60s total percentage from the field, 63, 64%. And then he just has a perfect running mate. They just need to be on the floor together, which is what we haven't really seen to this point. So that's my second player. Curious to hear what you guys think, but I think Mark is someone we forget about sometimes just because he hasn't really been on the floor that much in his career.
Yeah, I dig. I mean, I didn't forget about him. I didn't have him on my list, but that was more because I didn't want to jinx it. We've just barely seen this guy play in the NBA. And
That's fair.
between him and LaMelo, it's just like come on, like the Hornets have had more talent than their record has suggested the last couple of years. I think they're going to be a trendy pick from like nerds like us to like overperform what
Yes.
their like over under is, just because people just assume they have no talent, and then you look at the roster, it's like, oh, actually, like you can put together a pretty decent rotation here. And Williams, I think, could potentially be both a driver of and a beneficiary of this being like just a more normal, competent basketball team next year, with a full complement of players who should be playing NBA minutes in the rotation. But again, like we just have to see it. Like we just have to see him stay on the court, because when he has been on the court, he's been productive, and I would say on both ends. He's been basically what he was advertised as defensively before the draft, and then offensively, I think he's probably been a little better just in terms of his hands and his finishing and that stuff. Like I've really liked the fairly limited amount of Mark Williams that I've seen in the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I feel the same. I love Mark Williams. I liked him coming to the draft, and then watching with LaMelo, it was one of those moments where going to the draft, I felt Mark Williams would do really well with a point guard like LaMelo. Then going into the season, going into his rookie year, I was like, oh, just let me see this happen. Please let this be as good as I think it's going to be. And then it was exactly as I hoped it would be. Like those two have instant chemistry. I feel like LaMelo, especially in his rookie year when he was still having to deal with I think it was Cody Zeller and Mason Plumlee off the top of my head, that they're not quite the same level of vertical spacer where they can easily get off the ground the same way Mark Williams can. And he's a naturally, I think, a pretty good screener, which I feel like a lot of young bigs struggle with.
Mm-hmm.
So I just feel like they have a real kinship for how to play that pick and roll. And I look forward to seeing it for multiple, like the next couple of years. I think in terms of a breakout, I kind of feel like he's mostly a fully formed player. Like defensively, I think obviously you can work on your agility and mobility as a younger big like that who's not necessarily a switch big yet. Like he can definitely work on some of that. You still prefer to play him and drop, even if he has some of those show some of those flashes. He can work on that. But I think the one thing that I would point to that could possibly make him a breakout, up until this point, the Hornets haven't really asked him to shoot the ball at all. But there's always been a couple flashes. You go back to college, you even watch him, I think, his rookie year. There was a couple times when the Hornets would give him the green light to shoot once or twice, and the shot looked pretty decent. And he's an okay free throw shooter too. I'm not saying he's going to become Brook Lopez or anything at some point in his career, but even adding the ability where it's like, hey, not only am I a great vertical big, I have a little bit of that 6 to 10 foot range. I can get you a couple mid-range shots, and they'll be like high percentage shots. If he can pull that off, you're looking at a pretty complete big for the most part, and that's like a fulcrum you can build your entire roster around. So
yeah, like if he could just do what like Jared Allen was doing last year, like he took a few jumpers,
yep,
but it was mostly
exactly.
floaters and that kind of stuff, and the jumper looked fine.
Yeah,
and that was huge. I mean, I thought he took a big step forward
for sure. So what else you got for us, James, for next going to round 2 here?
I think it's time to get weird. Okay, I'm gonna go with
Do
Noah
it.
Clowney.
Yes.
Okay.
The summer league MVP played for the Nets, but it wasn't Noah Clowney. It was Jalen Wilson. But I think Noah Clowney was actually better. He's a crazy shot blocker. He's 6'9" and like is a stretch big. Basically, you saw last year in some like really meaningless games that like almost nobody in the world watched. I went to a couple of them. Like Clowney was really good. I think there's one game he hit like 5 threes against the Pistons. Like, but who the hell is watching a Pistons Nets game when both teams are essentially tanking? I mean, the Nets couldn't even tank, but you know what I mean. So look, he's going to walk into a role that I think is naturally going to be bigger than what he had last year. I mean, beginning of the year, he didn't really play. He was in the G League. You only really saw the flashes at the end. Like I could see him maybe starting, like because of the shot, you can play him with Claxton. I don't know that he will be doing that from day one. We have to see what ends up happening with that roster, but it's sort of like I was talking about with the Shaedon Sharpe thing. It's like, is Dorian Finney-Smith going to be on the Nets all year? Like nobody thinks that's going to be the case. Cam Johnson might not even be on the Nets the entire year. Right. Noah Clowney is one of the few guys that I think they are extremely invested in. You hear really good stuff just from other Nets players and people around the team in terms of, the guy's like turned 20 in the summer, and like the way that he's kind of takes in information and learns quickly, just the growth that they've seen from him. in basically a year. Like he's just been really impressive, and the skill set that I love personally, just because he's like a 6'9" dude who can shoot and protect the rim, and he can move his feet actually pretty well on the perimeter. Like you can switch him a little. He's not Claxton in that regard, but like he's not bad. So I mean, if those two guys are like their front line for the foreseeable future, I think that's like a really cool front court. And, you know, we have to see, like, I mean, Ben Simmons is theoretically going to be healthy and playing and taking up minutes. And right now, Dorian Finney-Smith is on the roster, and so is Johnson and everything. So, like, I don't know that you're going to think 2 weeks into the season that this is a breakout guy. Maybe. Like, I think he'll play. But I'm thinking, like, we've already seen a little bit just in terms of like what he did in summer league and what he did at the end of last year, that like I'm pretty confident in the skill package that he has. It's just a matter of, you know, how many minutes is he going to play? And I think the Nets are really incentivized to play the young guys a lot of minutes. And by the end of the year, they'll have figured out a way to do that with him.
I mean, I totally agree. I'm so glad you got weird and wonky with this because Noah Clowney, that's a great name. I wasn't confident enough to pull it, but now I wish I had because that is fantastic. I mean, even when you look at this roster, young guys, everyone says young guys, but there's not as many young guys as you think there are, right? Even Trendon Watford and Jalen Wilson, they're older than you think they are. They're going to turn 24 within the middle of the season. He is one of the, I could argue, other than maybe Cam Thomas, he's one of their few not fully formed players who, if you're giving developmental minutes to, I think it could actually help them a lot. I think he has that priority from the front office, I think, to play him more than someone like Trendon Watford. So I think even at the start of the season, he could see some of those backup power forward minutes for a while until Dorian Finney-Smith is eventually traded. And then, yeah, once that happens, I can see a full-fledged breakout happening. I mean, his big thing is offensively, maybe you don't trust him in terms of his feel, and then defensively, he's a little foul prone, but he's also 20, right? So you kind of expect, like, okay, you're going to have to play him more. You're the Nets. You don't really have a future or a present right now. You might as well get funky and just have some fun. So, I mean, I'm with it.
Who's number 2 for you then, Navi? You're gonna stick with the established player, or you're gonna dig a little deeper here and maybe get with a younger player?
I'm gonna dig a little deeper with the third one. With the second one, see, again, I don't think I'm really have to think about this. There were 2 players I had in mind here for one spot. Because both of them are guards, and I didn't know which one I wanted to pick. So I guess you know what, I will just stick with Cade Cunningham here because I just feel like he's been kind of, I don't want to say mistreated, but I feel like no rookie, no young player should ever have to go through what he's had to go through the last couple years with the Pistons. And it's just nice to see now that he'll have so many lineups where he actually has good spacing around him, good defenders who can try to protect him sometimes defensively. If you just throw out a Ron Holland or an Asir Thompson lineups out there alongside him, if you take Beasley out, like then you can mix and match so much more and create a competent team around him that lets him play to his strengths, generate much more easy 3-point pull-up opportunities for himself because if people actually have to worry about his drive because they know that the floor is space, so they can't just all swarm at him like they used to. I just think the possibilities for him to have the sort of season where maybe he's actually finally an all-star consideration, I think that's now finally on the table, even if I don't necessarily believe in JB Bickerstaff being innovative. At least the one thing I can say is he does a pretty good job of identifying who the talent is and then kind of giving them the ball and letting them cook. So I think I'll just pick Cade for that reason.
Yeah, no, I get it. He was on my like list, and then I was like, he's too good.
Yeah,
but that the rationale that you laid out there, that's exactly it, right? It's just like he has had some of the worst spacing that any ball handler has had to deal with in like recent NBA history, like just year after year after year. It's still not going to be perfect. I mean, just like they have to play Holland, they have to play Thompson, they have to play Ivy, and these are guys who aren't really going to space the floor so much from the other guard or 3 spot. But you know, I think it's going to be much better. They're going to be, I think they want to win more games than they did last year. I think it's just going to be a more stable situation. It's still a little weird. Like I didn't like the Paul Reed thing was like cool because the value was good, but then also it's like, are you going to end up playing beef stew at the 4 again? Like, how are you, like, what are we doing here?
I
So
never liked that.
I want to see what the rotation looks like, but I do think he's like way better than a lot of people realize already. Like he already fixed some of the turnover stuff as last season went on, and like, I mean, the guy's just a stud. Like I think he's a star now. We just haven't really gotten to see it, and I hope you're right. I hope we just fully see it this year.
I'm counting on him sharing more lineups with Fontecchio and Beasley and Tobias Harris, and fewer with Jaden Ivey, because I don't see any potential scenario where that combination is ever really going to work. I think Ivey's best hope is to just come off the bench right now and be almost like a backup guard of some kind, rather than starting it all with Cade. That's my hope. We'll see.
That's good. Hey, a little more foreshadowing there, man, because I was actually headed in that direction. You had one player for the backcourt of the Pistons, and I actually have the other player, but I'll save that. I'll save that for my segment. But this is round 3 now, guys. So we're gonna get into our last players. While we're talking about the Pistons, let's stick around the Pistons. Let's talk about them a little bit more, which is funny because I feel like Avi and I like talked about them at length last season, which is crazy to say because they're so bad. But I mean, they're just such an interesting team because of like how many different things were going on in the rotation and everything. It's just kind of all over the place. So you guys did mention Jaden Ivey before, and I'm still somewhat optimistic on him. I know for the arrangement that he has with Cade, it can be challenging and it may not be the best pairing, but I think one of the big problems he ran into last season, and I talked about this, like Avi and I did a sophomore summit podcast back in January. We talked about all these second-year players that are dealing with different things, but for Jaden last year, it was really just like, I mean, yeah, he's not a complete player and he had some issues and everything, but I really did not like the way that Monty Williams utilized him in terms of just the ups and downs of his DMPs, and then he would play and then he wouldn't play. Like I have some notes here from back in January that I put down, and November 10th, DNP, and then he had 5 minutes with less than 5 games with less than 20 minutes, and then he plays a lot and then he doesn't play at all, and it just like didn't really make sense to me because this is the guy that showed a lot of flashes his first season. He was top 6 in rookie of the year voting for 22-23. And you look at last season and like by the numbers, there's no improvement. It basically either stayed the same or got a little bit worse. When you look at his percentages, you look at the raw totals and things like that. Like there's just a lot of kind of just meh when you look at the numbers. My hope is that if he gets a consistent role, and maybe he does come off the bench, maybe he's that bench guard for them, I still see a world in which Jaden Ivey can be a very productive player. If he can just, I know for young players, I feel like a lot of the issue or a lot of the challenges they run into is just like, hey, what is my role from night to night? How many minutes am I playing? Am I playing next to a ball dominant guy like Cade? Am I the ball dominant guy? Just, I think a consistent role for Ivey is going to help so much. And again, even if it's starters minutes off the bench, like just playing with, I think for him, even having more spacing can help a lot. You look at his play style and the way he can get downhill in transition, coming off of screens, the way he can gather speed so fast. And if he has more spacing on his side, then I think it can really help him out just to be a little bit more efficient in every area of the floor and clean the glass. He's either about average or a little below average. You're looking at like mid 30s to like 40s when it comes to like the percentile in different areas of the floor. So I do think he's not super far away from being at least a decently efficient player from multiple areas of the floor, short range, 3-point line. He's not a 29% 3-point shooter. I mean, he's hovering around 33 to 34. So I think if he can pump those up a little bit, 36, 37, be a decent spacer, have a little bit more space to work with, have a more consistent role, have some veterans that he can rely on, have the Beasley with him, have Tobias Harris, guys like that. I think it helped him a lot. So, maybe I'm a little too optimistic. For some reason, I just feel like Ivey has another gear that he can hit if things are a little bit more stable this season. They're winning more games, and he doesn't have to worry about whether he's playing one night or the next for the Detroit Pistons. So there you have it. A lot of Pistons talk, but for some reason we can't avoid them on this podcast. We just keep coming back to them. So
yeah, I mean, it ties in with the Cade point. I mean, those backup units again. I don't think I trust Bickerstaff at all necessarily to actually come up with that many creative offensive sets for him. It's not like that's Bickerstaff's calling card. But again, the hope is if he's sharing more minutes with Beasley and Simone Fontecchio, if he's coming off the bench, I don't know who they're necessarily going to announce as starters, but I'm hoping that by the midway point of the season, they stop doing Cade and Ivy together and keep them separate. If Ivy develops more as a ball handler, as a secondary, almost a backup point guard, like if it's not like Marcus Sasser balled out to the level last year where I feel like you need to prioritize him necessarily over Ivy. So if Ivy needs the ball in his hands to cook and he needs the open space, then I think there's a chance for him to break out in his role, break out as an average NBA player rather than a subpar NBA player, which is kind of what he's been up until this point. Then in that sense, yeah, I can see a breakout because that is a meaningful gap, a meaningful jump a lot of times for second and third year players to take that leap from being like, hey, on a good team, you probably shouldn't be in the rotation to being like, hey, you could be like a bench level player on a good team. I think there is a meaningful gap between those two outcomes. So yeah, I could see a breakout in that sense.
I think it's like the right time for a breakout. Like, I think, they got rid of the guy who just clearly didn't want to play him at the beginning of last year. And the spacing should be a little bit improved, but you're sort of weighing the two things, right? It's like maybe you believe in Ivy's skill set and you believe he's kind of ready to make a jump, but at the same time, it's like, all right, like what exactly is that going to look like in terms of like just on this team in this situation? Because like Asar Thompson needs to play a lot, I think. Ron Holland, they just drafted him. Like, I don't know like exactly what they're going to throw at him in year one, but like when he is playing, like he kind of needs the ball. And then Cade is going to be probably playing like 35 minutes a game. So I'm almost like, yeah, like I could see the breakout. I could also see him maybe like getting traded and then breaking out on another team too. Like,
Yeah,
that's true.
I don't
think
know.
that's also an option. Yeah.
All right, tell me, should I pick a guy who was picked in the late lottery or a guy who was undrafted 2 years ago?
Undrafted could be interesting.
Undrafted.
That'd be
I'm sorry.
spicy.
I love it. I love it.
All
Let's
right,
do
this
that.
is going to be the weirdest pick. This is a guy who's he's on a two-way contract right now. I'm picking Scottie Pippen Jr.
Yes.
Oh, I love him.
There we go.
That's a great
He was one of the names I had written down.
That's a good pick.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, this guy, like, in theory, he could kind of bring them a little of like what Tyus Jones used to bring the Grizzlies. In that he's a super good passer. I just kind of trust him when he has the ball in his hands, but also like he has a bit of like defensive kind of pep and intensity that I think is like a little different than some of those more like game managery guys. Like if you look at how he played in summer league, like it was fully on both ends. And even if you look at some of the games he had late last year when, again, it's sort of like the Clowney thing. Like these were games that nobody was watching. The Grizzlies had a very kind of stitched together roster. And he had some games where it's like, all right, he's got like 28 points and like 2 steals and 6 assists and a couple of rebounds. Like he put up some numbers. I think he really kind of showed to the Grizzlies that he is an NBA player, which I mean, after a couple of years sort of, mostly on the Lakers G League team, that was a real question. Like, who is this guy? And like, he's nothing like his dad, obviously, but I think he is quite good. He was one of the best players in summer league. Like, I think, again, like I'm not trying to like crap on Jalen Wilson or anything. He had a good summer league, but I think there was also an argument that Scottie Pippen Jr. was actually the MVP of summer league. He was that good there. So I don't know what the rotation looks like. Again, like Marcus Smart could just, start at the 2 and then play all of the backup minutes and then everybody else is screwed. Maybe the veterans still think like, we want Derrick Rose to be part of this rotation. We love him. Please give him a shot. Like maybe they try that for a bit. I think Pippen's flat out like much better than Derrick Rose at this stage of Derrick Rose's career. And to me, like he has shown enough that I would want to carve out some minutes for him. Even if it means that like, Kennard has to sacrifice a few minutes. Marcus Smart has to sacrifice a few minutes. Like if I'm the Grizzlies, I want to know what I have here because he's a super promising player to me.
Yes.
I agree. 100%. And I'm just so happy you picked him. He was one of those on my list. The only reason I hadn't brought him up when you had first told me to go with the third one, he was who I had originally had down. Okay. I changed my mind when you were speaking about someone really out of the box. I forgot who I was thinking of. Like for a moment while I was speaking, I had inspiration. I don't remember if it was Sam Merrill. I don't remember who. But Scottie Pippen Jr., I just feel like he's an excellent player. The only real downside with him so far from what I've watched is that sometimes he's a little foul prone defensively, but he also gambles a lot and he will successfully get steals and deflections.
Yeah.
So on the whole, I think you wherever he ends up, even if it's not with Memphis, even if Memphis eventually just casts him aside in some sort of trade they make at some point if they trade Kennard or something, wherever he ends up, whether with the Grizzlies or with his next team, I think there is like a high quality backup point guard in there. So, and I feel like at some point this year, he's almost going to force his way into breaking out just because every time you play him, he will be pretty good. So that's why I love this pick. Like I wasn't sure about whether I should name him or not, just because I was afraid of him getting stuffed down the rotation by Morant and Marcus Smart and Kennard and all.
He is on a two-way contract. Like I'm kind of going out on a limb
Yes.
here. Like
Yes. Yeah. Good. Yes. Jordan Miller, he's also on a two-way contract. He was another guy I had in mind too. It's the same sort of thought process where you're just like, I feel like this player is really good. I watched him in summer league. He balled out. I could make a case he should have been Summer League MVP over Jalen Wilson. Again, sorry, Jalen Wilson. I'm sorry. We've taken so many shots at you, but whatever, man. I'm sorry. Listen, he was second team Summer League and somehow won the MVP. I don't know how it
That was a little weird, but
it was weird. But yeah, I just love this pick, and I'm so glad you made it. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Like that championship game when they were playing Miami, I was like, dude, I was so stressed because like he was just hitting all these shots. Like he's a good threat off the dribble, off screens to be able to pull up, make the defense pay. And at the same time, it's like, hey, whoever's bringing the ball up the court for the other team, like they're just going to have a really hard time. So for two-way play like that, I mean, that's just so valuable to have, especially with a guy that's like a two-way player. I wouldn't be surprised if, that title doesn't last much longer, but yeah, I love that pick. That's excellent.
Sort of like for fans of Jose Alvarado. Like if you like that style of dude who's gonna just play super hard and also like is talented, like is skilled, like can make threes, can make nice passes. Like that's the thing. Like it's not just he's a pest. Like I think he's good.
There's one name here who I feel like just maybe because of opportunity, because of how committed the franchise is to him and how we've seen him in prior contexts versus what he's going to be in now. I feel like if we don't mention him as a breakout, it feels a little wrong. Josh Giddey, right? I mean, does that feel too obvious?
Actually,
considering
thought about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
I thought about it too. I didn't do it, but I thought about it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then I'm just going to do Josh Giddey because I feel like, you traded Caruso for him. You got a lot of backlash online. I can see, let's put it this way. I can see Bulls ownership being the type who would care about that significantly and making sure that, the player that they traded for will be a heavy emphasis of the coaching staff. I also feel like as long as LaVine is on the roster, you can't really start Kobe White and LaVine together. I just don't think any coach could really go to sleep thinking that LaVine and Kobe White are defending people in their backcourt. So even if Giddey's not a great defender, I mean, compared to those two, he looks like Jose Alvarado. So I just feel like Giddey's going to be given full access to cook as much as he wants. Whereas on the Thunder, I feel like he couldn't really shoot. I'm not sure where the shot's going to be long term, but at least his free throw shooting was better. He still wasn't exactly given primary reins. Like he wasn't always given the ball and just allowed to cook. He kind of had to play as a secondary, the guy who keeps the rock moving. He would generate a lot of assists that way, but I feel like it's going to be a completely different vibe when he's now almost given, let's say, 60, 70 touches a game. What might that look like production-wise? Last year, he averaged 12 points per game and 5 assists per game in 25 minutes. If we up that up to 30 to 35 minutes, could we be looking at a player here who averages 7 assists per game, 18 points per game on similar level of shooting? Because I don't think, if anything, maybe his true shooting percentage would even improve because I think he benefits more from a higher percentage of his shot diet coming from shots off of drives and not so much, hey, you got to catch and shoot here open just because his shot is kind of, iffy at this point. So I wonder if this could be one of those moments here where everyone kind of laughs at the trade and then just at least production-wise, maybe not necessarily winning-wise, but the Bulls are kind of a mess anyways. I think at least production-wise, Giddey could look like a huge breakout to a lot of people because he'll be fine defensively and then offensively he'll just be given everything he wants.
If he just does what he did 2 years ago, not anything better, he just does that, it'll seem like a breakout because everyone thinks he sucks now. And he had a really good year 2 years ago. And then last year was just frankly weird. Like things changed. His usage went down. They didn't quite know what to do with him. I thought the second half of the regular season, like when he was making his threes, he looked more confident. Like that looked better like later. And then as soon as the playoffs started, it was just back to that just being a big drain on the offense. And then obviously he's not helping you on the defensive end really. So it was awkward, but I do think, like I'm curious to see what things look like in Chicago, just because there are so many dudes that want the ball there that on the one hand, like the simplest answer is they just traded Caruso for him. You just let him cook, give him the ball. He's like been a point guard all his life, even when he's been masquerading as an off-ball player. This is where he's most comfortable, right? But then it's like, well, Kobe White kind of needs it a little. He can play off, like he's good off ball, but the reason why he broke out is they gave him the ball. That's like that's why he almost won Most Improved Player. And then you got Zach, who obviously, like, if he is healthy, he's their best player, so you should give him the ball. And beyond that, like Lonzo Ball is apparently he's gonna play. Like I'll believe it when I see it, I guess. But that's why. And Dosumu is pretty good. He doesn't. They're not gonna have him run the show, but I thought he was pretty good last year. So just like a lot of guys. So a lot of guys. It might not be the same guys. Vacuum. That's true, but I don't know if it'll be the same guys after the deadline as the guys that we see now. And I do think they're definitely invested in him. And and again, the bar is just so low because people just think that he's a bad player and that they traded Caruso for a bad player. And like the truth is, like, he's still really young. And just 2 years ago, I mean, you can find podcasts out there where people are talking about him in the same breath as, like Scotty Barnes and Evan Mobley and these guys. Is like, who would you rather have? Because he had a really good season. He is an incredible passer. He does honestly, like, I think the reason they wanted him is he's the opposite as a defender, but offensively, he does a lot of the same stuff that Lonzo does for you. Like, he really makes you play faster. He creates open opportunities for people, and he makes passes that most guys don't see. So, and he's big too. He's big like Lonzo, and he rebounds super well. So, if he plays a ton of minutes, like, it will probably look a little like it did a couple of years ago, maybe even better than that, just in terms of the counting stats. And that, like, whether or not that's a breakout depends, like, kind of how you define it. But, like, I think he certainly should be better than last year individually, right?
Yeah. Situation going to be much better. Absolutely. The box score is going to be nice. I think that's a given. It's just
100%.
Is it going to be translate to wins? Is he going to be efficient? How does the other rest of the rotation look? I think those are the question marks, but I think no doubt about it, he's going to look really good. Just having the ball in his hands again. That's where he operates best.
Yeah, I thought he was a better finisher last year, but 2 years ago he was given more opportunity, and I think he might get even more opportunity now as an all-ball creator than he did in either of those two seasons. Because even 2 years ago, there was a lot of times where because they do guard-to-guard screening, you would see Josh Giddey sometimes in like the short roll, just these really weird situations where you don't typically see a playmaker of his caliber. I didn't expect myself to be a Josh Giddey guy, but here I am. I really think there's a chance that this could be like a huge scoring output season where people are they completely reframe how they felt about Josh Giddey after kind of being on a roller coaster of being very high on him when he was in his rookie and sophomore year and then falling all the way down last year. I think it could be a return to form.
He was pretty aggressive in the Olympics too.
Yes.
Yeah, he was. Absolutely. So that's going to do it, guys, for our segment of breakout players. Let's quickly just go through a few honorable mentions. I think let's each just give one.
Okay.
You just give like a minute, like, hey, here's what I think, and then pass on to the next guy here. So, James, hit us with a name that you think is just someone to monitor, maybe not one of the top candidates, but is worth mentioning.
The late lottery pick I was going to do is Grady Dick, who kind of already did it because the second half of last year, he was a 40% 3-point shooter and like 52% inside the arc too. And you could just see it. Like, you could see why they wanted him. Like, he fits exactly how they want to play. He's super smart in terms of his decision-making, even like driving against closeouts. He moves really well off the ball. Like, he's a big dude who like leverages his shot into the other stuff. Like, and he's known as a shooter, and he is. That's primarily why he's at the NBA, but he's like, his whole thing is like, I'm not going to just be that guy, and they don't want him to just be that guy. And I think like he fits exactly how Darko wants the Raptors to play offense. And by the way, Gary Trent Jr. is gone. Bruce Brown is injured to start the year. Like, I think Grady Dick's going to start for the Raptors. So that's the formula for a breakout to me, especially because it's kind of cheating, because the breakout happened when he came back from the G League as a rookie.
Yeah, you're probably right. I personally didn't feel that great when I went back and watched him, just because but again, some of that is he is a rookie. I thought physically he was having a little bit more trouble defensively, and offensively, I didn't really trust him as someone, or like see him as someone who could necessarily attack closeouts or stuff well. But again, some of that is because as a rookie, and he has a long, lanky, slender frame, I feel like those players tend to struggle. There could be like a Duncan Robinson level arc here, whereas he slowly grows stronger and grows a little bit bigger. Now he starts fitting in better as a sophomore or junior in his junior season. And even this year in summer league, in the one game that he was healthy, I thought he looked better than he did in a lot of.
He didn't make a three, but he looked awesome.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of the opposite of how I felt about him in the regular season, where I felt like, hey, if he's making threes, I guess it's fine to have him out there, but if he wasn't making threes, it looked a little bit rough, and his plus minus stats were just awful. All right, partially because they were tanking, but he was also a little bit responsible for those as well because of his defense. But yeah, I could definitely see a breakout just because another year of being in an NBA level weight room, just being a little bit older and stronger. Right? For someone like him and his body type, I think it could make all the difference. Right. Do you want to go next with the honorable mention, or?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Okay. So a guy I thought about, and he was involved in an offseason trade here. So Dyson Daniels moved over to Atlanta for DeJounte Murray. And, Dyson obviously is not a offensive powerhouse by any stretch of the imagination, but I looked at his percentages from last season. Even though the three is still a work in progress, he was able to up his 2-point percentage by 6 percentage points from 49 to 55. So if he can at least just be like a serviceable offensive player, I think he's a hand in glove fit next to either Kobe Buffkin, who I think is another candidate to take a little bit of a jump, get some minutes there in a backup role. Also play with Trey. I think he's a lot better of a fit than DeJounte was. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. He's not going to compete with Trey for touches. He's not going to just commandeer possessions and try to get something in the mid range. He can just be more of like a cutter and maybe just kind of help out Trey as a screener maybe in some possessions. And just play like a little bit of like a subdued role offensively while just being that pest that you can throw on elite perimeter players from the other team. So, and actually, if you look at the distributing part of his game, I mean, he's not an amazing passer, but I mean, relative to his usage rate, he had a assist usage ratio of about 1.16, 72nd percentile for his position by cleaning the glass. So, 2.7 assists per game, but I mean, he barely has the ball in his hands. So I think he's actually like somewhat of a decent distributor, and you can put the ball in his hands from time to time. So I like him as like a mini kind of breakout player, just because I think his fit for Atlanta is perfect. And as a guy that's just going into his third year, I think being in that position, being able to fill a little bit of the void left behind by DeJounte, by committee with some other players, I think could end up being a really good fit for Atlanta.
Yeah, and he'll probably have to, because they don't have that much at backup guard. I mean, it's him and Kobe Buffkin, so he'll get more opportunity scoring wise than he ever did in New Orleans. So I can see that as a sort of mini breakout.
Yeah, I feel like they wanted DeJounte to be the defender that he was like before he got hurt in San Antonio, and he just kind of wasn't that in Atlanta. I don't think DeJounte was like bad in Atlanta. I just think he was like not really the fit that they were looking for. And Daniels is like, he's going to play a smaller offensive role, and he's going to be just a crazy defender. Like, he can guard anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
If you could fuse him and my pick, well, my non-pick in Grady Dick, then you'd have yourself an insane player.
It's a pretty nice player. Do a little bit of everything.
I just imagine that player fusion in my head, and that is crazy. Wow, that would be a really good player. That would be so much fun.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I think you just created an all-star. What did you guys create? Like some sort of like Klay Thompson, like Marcus Smart, some sort of like amalgam of those guys. Like, I don't even know what to.
Yeah.
My brain can't comprehend what I just imagined.
I love it. The man scientist, James Herbert, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well then I'm just gonna go with honorable mention here, Podziemski. again, it's really rare to me to watch. I know he played a lot basically as a de facto shooting guard per se, but he came into the league pretty much with the idea that he was going to be a point guard. And it's very rare for you to see a point guard come into the league as a rookie and produce like a good quality season. And
Mm-hmm.
especially when he's not playing in his preferred position, right? Because Chris Paul is still the one running the backup units. He's playing with Steph. Sometimes he's having to play alongside Steph or Clay in some of their lineup configurations. Like that's not exactly an easy role for a rookie point guard. And he had one of the best rookie point guard seasons. Like if you go through the list of rookie point guard seasons, of course, someone like John Morant is just like, oh wow, this is just some sort of like crazy outlier. Like I don't even know what to do with this. This is so awesome. But among most of the rest of the group, you could argue in terms of efficiency, effectiveness, his defensive chops. It's above seasons from even players like Jalen Brunson, who came with a lot of experience. De'Aaron Fox, Lonzo Ball, some of these top 5, top 10 level picks. Like I thought he had a really good season. Chris Paul is gone now. Klay Thompson is gone now. Yes, I know you have DeAnthony Melton, and I know you have Gary Payton Jr. Sorry, Gary Payton II, and I know you have Buddy Hield. But within their closing lineup, I would still say there is a void there that you can kind of fill. Last year during their playing game, when they were finishing off when they were trying to make a valiant effort against the Kings before just getting blown off the floor, their closing lineup in a sense was Steph, Clay, Kuminga, Wiggins, and Draymond. And I think with the Clay spot gone, the best case high upside ceiling outcome for the Warriors is if Pajemski starts playing so well as a backup point guard in a lot of these minutes, taking the role that Chris Paul ceded when he left for San Antonio.
Yeah.
And if he improves his shooting even more, he becomes even more comfortable making decisions when he's being passed to off the catch, that you can actually start funneling him in more as a shooting guard in some of those lineups with Steph. I think his scoring output could go much higher than the meager 9 points per game, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists he was at. I think you could be looking at maybe like a 15 point per game player there. So
I love Pods, man. Like
me too.
especially to come into that system and
Yes.
just fit. Like he looked so ready for all of it on the offensive end. He looked ready on the like tough as hell defensively too.
Oh yeah,
Doesn't look
Led
like
the league
anything.
in charges taken.
yeah. I was
Yeah.
about to say Chargers. Yeah,
But like you look at him, you would think this guy's probably a terrible defender. And I'm not just saying like it just, you watch him do it and it's like, all right, like he is just willing to go in, put his nose in there. He is going to be physical. He's not afraid of picking up fouls, but he's not like a super foul prone, like hacky guy either. He picks up, he draws charges like crazy. He's just super smart on both ends of the floor in a way that's like really, really unusual for a young player. Just so many players have come in, even vets have come into the Warriors and they're good elsewhere. They try to get their head around this system where everybody's moving and supposed to be a threat at all times and all of this, and they can't do it. For him, it was just like day one, like this guy can fit in. And I thought even with that, he got better throughout the season. And I believe in the shot. I believe like this is gonna be a core player for the Warriors going forward. Like to see like how they handle his minutes and Kuminga's minutes and like Moody's minutes and all of that, considering some of the veterans that they brought in the summer, like they almost have too many good players, which is weird because it's not like the Warriors are like this like championship team, but they're like insanely deep with pretty good players.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and so I think Kerr's going to have some like really, really, really difficult decisions to make. Like, I think it's going to be really tough on a nightly basis to figure out who should play with whom. But Pods, I just feel like inherently like he has to play a ton. Like he's too good to keep off the floor.
I mean, if you're going to hold off on Lowry market and trade talks because you don't want to include Pods, I think that says a lot about how they feel, like how they feel about him in general, what he means to their future and their core. So, they're high on him and for good reason. He's a fantastic player already, and he's just going to get better with age. So, James, Avi, we're going to wind this down, but this has been a great discussion. I think we all throw out some great names here, and there were different names. I mean, we had prior top 10 picks, late lottery guys, undrafted players. I mean, a little bit of everything, man. So I think it was a great combination here. Avi, always great to have you on. James, as our special guest, thanks again for taking a good chunk of your day here with us. It's been a great time, and you're welcome back anytime on the pod here. And hope everything goes well for you in the CBS Sports role next season.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. And if you guys are looking for more episodes, go ahead and check out notradeclause.com. No trade underscore clause on Twitter X, no trade clause one word on Instagram, and also YouTube. We have plenty of clips going up on there, so be sure to keep it locked for more content. And we'll be coming back at you guys real soon for more preseason action as we get ready for the new season. So take care, everybody, and hope to see you soon.